Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Longtime listeners of the Break It Down show will remember Mark Valley. He dipped his toe into the world of podcasting as a co-host of this very show on and off for a few months before developing his podcast about spycraft. He's best known as an actor, having starred in network shows like Boston Legal, Harry's Law, Fringe, Human Target, and Body of Proof, and most recently he's shown up in The Flash and The Romanovs. He graduated from West Point, an education that uniquely qualifies him for strong roles. He's annoyingly handsome. He also writes, and he's got a wonderful insight and curiosity into the human experience that he sees from a variety of angles. He's a fascinating guy to talk with. He and Pete jump right into it, so don't let your AirPods drop. Here's our friend and today our guest, Mark Valley.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Morales.
This is Stewart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Tao Papua, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
You know, whether you're laughing or agreeing or disagreeing, there's something about two people feeling connected when a conversation is going on. You're both holding a rope, and one person is pulling one end, and one person is pulling the other. And that's when I feel I have some type of rapport. It doesn't necessarily mean you agree with the other person either.
Right.
It just feels like, oh, we're both communicating in the same language, but also willing to communicate together. We're both kind of engaged. So I usually feel it with timing.
Okay. Timing. Okay. That makes sense. And then what about like when you're in a delicate area? And I don't know how often you get into that stuff on the show. I mean, I listen as often as I can, but I certainly don't hear all of them. But when you're in a space where you want to be careful, but you don't want to be so careful you don't get in there, you know, like, I don't know, whatever it is, like techniques or money or, you know, all these things, culture, where you're like, this is going to be tricky. How do you sort that out?
What I've started doing on my show is I joke around. I say, listen, I'm really kind of a nerd about the spy stuff. Sometimes I'm going to be dipping into sources and methods and asking you things. I just wondering right now if we can just have a code word.
Uh-huh.
You know, if it gets too close, we can have a safe word where you don't have to say something. And I usually get a laugh about that because most people in the intelligence community, they're really good at, they pride themselves on being able to sort of deftly avoid being drawn into questions where they're giving more information where they feel safe. So I think I just kind of recognize that in the beginning and then go from there. Because that's sort of an obvious fear that somebody has. Is this person just trying to get me to talk about stuff or what's going on? You know, the other thing I do is when I get into something that's a little more heavy, and I think this is probably just due to my own role in my family, even as a kid, is when things get a little bit intense, I start to put my feelers out to think, okay, where's the funny?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how am I going to get out of this? I mean, there's an interview I was doing recently with Tom Pecor with someone who was talking about PTSD, and I did have one question I was saving. I was wanted to ask him because on a page of one of his books, but he was wearing a fanny pack. I wanted to ask him why he was wearing a fanny pack. Was it like it was a fashion choice, or was this just some essential part of his gear?
Yeah.
So I knew that could be a funny question anywhere I could drop in, and it seemed to be the right time to kind of diffuse when it felt a little bit heavy, you know, where it felt like it was. I wanted to help, you know, move the situation, move the conversation on. So. Yeah, I try to have some questions that are a little bit light as well.
One of the things I do is I call it putting on a jacket. I put on someone else's jacket and I act like I'm this person. So, and I don't care for the devil's advocate because that guy is often a dick and I'm trying not to be a dick. So I call myself the practical advocate, which, you know, like practical, like how do you practically do this? So one thing this, you know, say get up and go to the gym every day, but for the person who's struggling we got to back it up a little bit. Like find that spot where it actually works. Or, the Green New Deal sounds great, but like legitimately, how do you change everything? Like practically, how do we actually do this? And then there's also like the everyman jacket that I put on. Like, this is the obvious question that I have to answer for everybody in the audience, and so that it sort of, it gives me an allowance to do something.
Yeah, I have to ask this question. Yeah.
So that works for you too. Like you have like different ways to fire the question out without like it being from Mark.
Well, what I do as well is I write down, because you've done it yourself probably. I mean, you've done so many more interviews than me, and I've learned an awful lot from you. But I was just wondering if you do get this feeling at the end of an interview where you think, I should have asked him this. I forgot to ask him this. Or that was the one thing that I wanted to ask. So I tend to, when I'm writing down my list of questions, that's one thing I definitely write down. I was like, if it's all going to end in 10 minutes and I could only ask them these 3 questions, what are they going to be?
Yeah.
Like what are the things, what are the really questions that I have to ask?
I have a different thing with that. I certainly akin to it, but there's the question that I need to ask and the question that I want to ask. And I try to kill the ones that I want to ask because they're often ego driven. And, I just haven't mastered that yet where I'm like, I want to inject me into this question or whatever it is. And it's less about the guest. So where I struggle is this question a me question or a show question? And I try to ask the show question more often than not. But I'm not going to act like that's easy to do because it's really hard for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's one thing I need to start doing is thinking a little bit more about the audience and who's listening. I mean, some people have said it sounds like they're listening in on a conversation that I'm having. And I feel, for me personally, if I'm not interested in what I'm doing or what I'm talking about, then it just tends to be a rough rough interview. And I need to start thinking about that. Like what is it? What are show questions and what are Mark questions?
Right.
I usually have a few show questions on there, but generally I try to get into it enough where, bring on guests where I feel like that they're Mark questions. But there was something else you said that made me think about it. Putting a jacket on.
Yeah.
And talking to people. Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking about is like one of the things I like about podcasting is you say, look, we can talk for up to an hour. And if you're starting an interview out, it's like you're in a car and it's like we're driving to Long Beach, right?
Yeah.
Right. We're going to be in the car for an hour together.
Yeah.
And the way you don't like ask somebody, I tend to ask people a question like I'm sitting in the car with them.
Okay.
And we're kind of on a trip and we're driving together. So it's a little different than getting a quick soundbite out of somebody or, feeling the safety of being, either on a phone or on the computer or something like that. I sort of feel like, well, we both have to do this interview together and it's going to take an hour. So I think that might color some of the questions. I mean, it also probably helps the rapport, but I think having that feeling that we're doing something together.
So like an underlying premise helps give you comfort so that you're not bound up by whatever it is that holds you back from asking whatever question. Is that what you're saying?